All right, so the next question is, what was the most effective feedback that I have received, and what were my next steps based on that feedback? This one took me a little while to think about because as a teacher, we get a lot of feedback. We have the opportunity to be observed and to really work on our craft and hone in on our craft as teachers. So I've gotten a lot of feedback in the past, especially being a new teacher. I receive a lot of it, and I try to put it as much of the feedback in place as I can. One particular set of feedback that I received really stuck out to me was during my first year of teaching. I had the opportunity to have a coach that had previously worked at a residential treatment for students with behavioral needs, and she helped me out a lot with my classroom. As a first year teacher, I kind of reflected the way that the previous teacher had taught. It worked for her, and it seemed to run really smoothly, but unfortunately for me, it didn't fit into the style that I was trying to teach. So there was a couple things that we were going to correct. At the beginning of that year, the students were having lunch by themselves, watching a movie in my classroom. They were also having recess at a completely separate time than the other students. And then they had to earn their way out of my classroom, so be able to earn other classes with their general education peers by having appropriate behaviors in my room and showing that they can use coping skills in that affective needs environment. This was not working for us particularly because we had noticed that there was a lot of behaviors starting. These students were spending just way too much time together, not getting a chance to see appropriate behaviors from same age peers, and really picking up a lot of negative behaviors from each other at that point. So my coach gave me the feedback that maybe I should think about having a different way for students to be able to be in the general education environment. At that particular time of year, it was a little too late in the year for me to make major changes without disrupting the environment that we had. I waited until the following year, my second year of teaching, in order to adjust our schedule so that they could have lunch and recess with their peers. But that year, I had some students that were really strong in reading and really strong in math, so I collaborated with the mild moderate teachers in order to get them into their classes. Now I know that's not in the general education environment, but it was a really good transition for them to move to that environment because they were able to get to know some of their peers in a small group setting, so that really helped them out that year. The next year, I made some pretty hefty changes. I looked at our master schedule for the school and was able to finagle it so that I can have my students having lunch with some of their peers as well as recess too. I thought this was really helpful because they could be in that environment, see how other people interact, and really hone in on those appropriate behaviors instead of only seeing the negative ones that tend to happen in our classroom when they're together too much of the time. Another thing that we added is that students would go to their morning meeting classes. They were each assigned a homeroom teacher for their grade level, and they would go to that morning meeting after they had breakfast. And then we were in a national baccalaureate school, so they would go to the IB portion of the day with support from either myself or the paraprofessionals that I worked with. We tweaked that again a little bit the following year because the morning was a little bit of a rough time for everybody to get started, whether they came in sleepy or did not have a good night's rest the night before, whatever the case may be. It was a little bit of a rough patch in the morning. And then IB as well. We're supposed to implement IB throughout the entire school day. So when my students would go in for IB time, they felt like they were really missing things, and the teachers would have to play a lot of catch up to get them to where they needed to be. And so my third year, so the previous school year, I changed a couple things again, and that was where we saw the most success. My students had breakfast in the cafeteria with the other students. They had lunch with the other students in the cafeteria as well, and they had recess outside, so they had a lot of integration in that way and got to know their peers. And then every student had a homeroom teacher and would go to specials with each of those teachers with either, again, my support or support from paraprofessionals. As students showed that they could handle a little bit more in those environments, we would give them a little bit more to handle either in math or reading, science, or social studies, wherever they felt confident, but really keeping in mind that we need to give them a little bit more support from the staff in my classroom as we did that. once we implemented that, I noticed a huge difference in the behaviors of the kiddos in my class, that they had friends outside of class, so it was not so detrimental to them if they were on the outs with people in the AN classroom. They had other kids to turn to as well. They were able to learn appropriate behaviors from peers their same age. They were able to be a part of the school because the kids at first didn't know who they were. They were able to be a part of the school at that point, and I saw a major change in just my students' demeanors and the environment of our classroom as well. And that was probably one of the greatest feedbacks I've received.